Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Off in the S's podcast, a podcast focusing on the IMSA Weathertech Sportscar Championship. I'm your host, Stu, and today we are going to be reviewing the recently completed Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona, and man, oh man, what a banger of a season opener that it was for IMSA. So much great racing out there, of course, across the entire 24-hour period, but not just in that 24-hour race. We had some amazing Support Series races as well. Today, we are going to walk you through all of the action that took place in Daytona and keep you up to date with everything that went on. But before we do that, make sure that you are subscribed to Off in the S's on your favorite podcasting app, and make sure that you never miss an episode. You can also interact with us on Twitter at Off in the S's or on YouTube at Off in the S's podcast. Links to both of those can be found in the show notes. I also want to just quickly put this out there is oftentimes I would love to be getting this show out on Wednesday or Thursday following the race. Unfortunately, this week it comes a little bit later. This appears to be released on the weekend for everybody. But going forward, you can expect the shows to typically be released closer to the middle of the week. But without further ado, let's hop into it with some news from the world of IMSA. We're going to kick this show off with a little bit of, it's actually some very interesting news. It's kind of a feel-good story throughout the entire lead up to this year's 24 Hours of Daytona. But there was a great video that Robert Wilkins released in the lead up to his Michelin Pilot Challenge season debut, where it does a very good job of documenting the hand controls that he used this past weekend and exactly how they work. Of course, we'll talk about it in a moment. Of course, it looked like he handled those controls very, very nicely behind that Hyundai TCR and ended up with a podium position out of it. But again, we'll talk about that more later on. But in the meantime, if you would like to watch that video that Mr. Wilkins released, you can find the link to that YouTube video in the show notes. United Autosport and its LMP2 entry was informed that they will need to adjust their driver lineup for the remaining Michelin Endurance Cup races. Per IMSA regulations, they only permit a maximum of one gold or platinum driver, while Phil Hansen and Guy Smith are both gold drivers, and thus only one of them is permitted to contest the entire Michelin Endurance Cup entry. It was Hansen is announced to race with Todd Gamble in the team's ELMS entry, with Hansen also racing with the team in their WEC entry. It was later announced that Duncan Tappy will be the driver to replace Phil Hansen for Sebring, with the team calling it a one-off race. Tappy will also race in the United LMP2 entry in ELMS with Hansen and Gamble, after initially being slated for another season of LMP3. Some big news was released on the Friday before the Rolex 24 Hours, as the bus stop in Daytona is no longer named as such. It was announced on Friday that the bus stop at Daytona would be renamed the Le Mans Chicane, and in conjunction with this, the first chicane on the Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans will be named the Daytona Chicane. This idea stemmed from discussions between NASCAR and IMSA chairman Jim France and ACO president Pierre Fillon during the last year's 24 Hours of Le Mans. In addition, the curbs were also painted in an alternating blue and yellow pattern as a symbol of unity between the two venues. More big news coming in the lead up to the 24 Hours, as in 2023, IMSA's top class of prototype racing will be renamed GTP. This change coincides with the move to the new LMDH cars, which will feature both Le Mans Daytona Prototype, or LMDH, and Le Mans Hypercar, or LMH spec machinery, to compete in this new GTP class. The first race that will feature this new GTP class will be next January's Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona. Of course, you will remember that GTP was previously used in what many people refer to as the golden era of IMSA prototypes from 1981 to 1993, where there was a wide number of manufacturers that had entries in the series, which, to be honest, is looking like it's trending that way yet again. The same cars will be eligible in WEC to race under the hypercar name, and a link to the article with that new logo, a new clean logo I will add, can be found in the show notes. There will be a Ford Mustang Gt3 that will return to the grid in 2024 with a Multimatic aka M Sport team fielding 2 cars in GTD Pro. M Sport previously ran the Bentley GTD program, and in conjunction with this announcement, Ford also announced that a new Mustang GT4 will debut next year in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge. IMSA and Michelin were further enforcing penalties for not operating within their tire pressures and proper camber for last weekend's Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona. Teams will get a penalty after their 3rd warning, which, if during the race, will result in a stop plus 10-second penalty, and if it is discovered during qualifying, it will mean that the qualifying time will be disallowed. This did affect a couple of teams, as the number 79 and number 97 WeatherTech Racing entries and the number 16 Wright Motorsports Porsche entry all received penalties after the qualifying race and had to start from the rear of the field. Riley Motorsports will be using their auto invite for the 24 Hours of Le Mans to enter a Ferrari 488 GTE Evo in the GTE Pro class. Of course, they earned that invite courtesy of Gar Robinson, winning the LMP3 category in 2021. Other IMSA invitee Rob Farrell has also confirmed intent to race in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. He is currently seeking a European team to help support them in their efforts to race. One conflict that is currently being worked around is a Le Mans test day, which currently conflicts with the Sprint Cup only round of Belle Isle, but it is being worked out how Rob Farrell will be able to work around that conflict and still attend the Le Mans test day. There will be a single GTD Pro Lamborghini entry for Sebring that will be fielded by TR3 Racing. The team will field the car with drivers Andrea Caldarelli, Mirko Borolotti, and Marco Mappelli. These 3 joined forces for the 24 Hours of Spa in 2021, and it has been reported that there is the potential to race in the other 2 Michelin Endurance Cup races this season. Ryan Eversley will make his full-time IMSA WeatherTech debut after being confirmed in a full-season ride in Rick Ware's Acura NSX GT3 Evo 22. He will team up with Aiden Reed in the car, and Rick Ware Racing has been a mainstay in NASCAR in recent years, with the occasional entry in IMSA. Eversley has previously run with RWR at Road America in a NASCAR Cup Series race in 2021. Of course, you'll recall that Eversley is a past champion in the Michelin Pilot Challenge TCR category and makes a very strong addition to the grid. Significant changes are coming for the Lamborghini Urkhan GT3 Evo 2 when the new model is unveiled for 2023 use. The Urkhan has been raced since 2015, and it has been 4 years since the first Evo was introduced. Lamborghini head of motorsport Giorgio Sanna stated that the car will look significantly different and feature reworked aero and tech advancements for the car that is expected to be run from 2023 through 2026. Porsche has confirmed that they will use twin-turbo V8s in their LMDH entry. Per LMDH regulations, the maximum power output is 670 horsepower, including the spec hybrid system, with maximum revs capped at 10,000 RPM and the minimum weight of the engine at 180 kilograms. Porsche, of course, they felt like this was their best balance of performance, weight, and cost in the car, and it was reported that Porsche was supposed to do an initial public showing of the car, but due to their testing delays, that has had to be pushed back a little bit. Racers Edge and WTR Wayne Taylor Racing have joined forces and will be competing in a GTD Pro Class Acura NSX GT3 Evo 22 in next month's Mobile One 12 Hours of Sebring. Kyle Marcelli, Tom Long, and Ashton Harrison will drive the car. Of course, Racers Edge have been a mainstay in SRO competition in recent years, having won the Pro-Am title in 2019. This was an expected development for Wayne Taylor Racing, as they have been looking to get back into GT racing with Acura. Any races beyond Sebring, however, have not yet been confirmed. As was expected, the BMW M4 Team RLL will reduce their capacity to just one entry for the remainder of the season. The team was expected to do this after Daytona as they shift their efforts towards LMDH development for 2023. One last article I want to put out there that I thought was a good read. There was a great Racer.com article that offered insight on the conversion of the Corvette C8R to get it down to GT3 spec. I will, of course, put the link to that in the show notes. There is plenty of support race and pre-race news to talk about, though, from the week that we had at the Rolex 24hrs of Daytona, as opening practice for the 24 was plagued by rain, and the LMP2, yes, the LMP2 of Pato O'Ward was fastest in that Dragon Speed Oreca 07 Gibson. 47 of the 61 cars took place in the practice, which experienced light rain for the entire session. Despite the rain, however, there were no major incidents. In free practice 2, it was Felipe Albuquerque and his Wayne Taylor Racing Acura that was on top in yet another damp and slippery Thursday evening practice session. Rain fell just before the session, which saw 56 of the 61 entered cars take part, and 68 different drivers take the wheel. The only red flag of the session occurred after 29 minutes when LMP2 driver Dennis Anderson and GTD driver Bill Sweedler spun at the exit of Turn 1 and Turn 6, respectively. On Friday, it was the 01 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac of Sebastian Bourdais that was fastest in final practice, that saw much better conditions than those experienced on Thursday. The session was briefly red flagged with 12 minutes to go when Alex Ribera's Heart of Racing Aston Martin Vantage GT3 came to a halt at the bus stop with an unknown issue that required a system reset. Track action was not delayed for long and resumed shortly after. Team RLL's Augusto Fargas was downplaying BMW's chances before the weekend, stating that the primary goal for the weekend is just to learn more about the M4 and to make sure that they remain realistic about results that they can expect to get. More important for the team was getting a strong result was to learn more about the car and how the car reacts to different adjustments to setup, different temperatures. Which, based on the temperatures that we saw in the 24, they definitely got to run under some different temperatures and just get a better feeling for the car over the course of a race weekend. In Michelin Pilot Challenge news, it was announced during the week that Michael Cooper would replace Frank Depew in the number 71 Rebel Rock Racing Chevrolet Camaro GT4 for the season opener. Depew has opted out of the BMW M Endurance Challenge due to a family medical issue that popped up during the week. Thankfully, Cooper was already at the track as he was competing in the LMP3 category. In Mazda Idemitsu MX-5 Cup news, it was reigning champ Gresham Wagner who found the tire barrier in qualifying, but it was not heavy contact that was sustained on that Mazda and was able to make the race without issue. Heading into race 1 and the opening race for this series in 2022, it was rain and cold temperatures that plagued the opening race as drivers needed to exercise extreme caution throughout the entirety of the race. However, despite these tricky wet conditions, halfway through the race was the only time that action was halted, and it was halted for 4 laps due to a full course yellow period. On the ensuing restart, Gresham Wagner briefly took the lead, but was forced to serve a penalty for incident responsibility, which took him out of contention for the race win. It was not that everybody was talking about, though. The MX-5 Cup once again produced an absolutely thrilling finish, with the race coming down to a 4-wide finish, with 12th place starter Tyler Gonzalez winning by 0.062 seconds over Alexander Nunes. Celine Rollin crossed the line 2 1,000ths of a second behind Nunes, and rookie Connor Zilch was a further 6 100ths of a second adrift in 4th. After crossing the line, however, Celine Rollin ended up crashing into the wall, and while he walked away fine from the incident, he was forced to go to a second car for race number 2. Full race results are as follows. In 5th place, it was Jared Thomas. Bruno Carnerio followed in 6th place. Michael Carter in 7th place. Maximilian Opolski in 8th. Sam Paley in 9th. And Aaron Johnson wrapped up the top 10. Race 2 was considerably different from race 1, as slight drizzle at the start of the race forced an additional pace lap to be conducted, but all 31 registered cars were able to start the race. There was a big hit in the opening 10 minutes of race 2 as Michael Carter had the car snap right very suddenly through the tri-oval as he stuck the left side Michelin rubber onto the double painted yellow line and saw him go very hard into the safer barrier. He was okay, but the car is in very bad shape and will take quite a bit of repairs in order to get ready for Sebring. On the ensuing restart, there was not even a full lap of racing completed before the full course yellow was thrown yet again for a trio of cars that came together going into the Le Mans chicane. This led to another lengthy delay as one of the cars actually burst into flames while coming to a stop. Of course, everybody was able to walk away fine from this incident. And on the ensuing restart from that, there was yet another incident that led to a full course yellow, which ultimately the race ended under. In a somewhat disappointing race, there were only a total of 4 green flag laps that were completed in the 45 minutes of running, which really is truly a shame considering the spectacular races that we've seen take place in this MX-5 Cup at Daytona in previous years. Regardless, in race 2, it was Jared Thomas that picked up the win. He finished ahead of Gresham Wagner and Joey Atenozio on the podium. Chris Nunes finished in 4th, with Sam Paley rounding out the top 5. Celine Rollin finished in 6th, just in front of Connor Zilch. Woody Hyman finished in 8th, with Jamison Riley finishing 9th, and Bryce Cornett rounding out the top 10. The MX-5 Cup was not the only race, not the only support race that had a heck of a race and so many battles going for it this weekend, as the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge also had a very entertaining race as well. For the BMW M Endurance season opener, the 4-hour-long race saw a clean opening stint, with a penalty being handed out to Billy Johnson very shortly after the race start for not staying in his lane and having to serve a drive-through penalty. This dropped him to the back of the grid. The first full course yellow was shown at the half-hour mark with a 98 Hyundai TCR grinds to a halt on the backstretch and needed to be towed. It was a clean restart, though, and at the 1-hour mark of the race, the TCR running second in class came to a stop, which also led to a short full course yellow period. After yet another clean restart, there was some very strong racing going on around the hour-and-a-half mark as the leading TCR of the number 89 Hart Honda is slow on the apron of the track and ends up going behind the wall. Meanwhile, the number 09 Aston Martin also goes around in the International Horseshoe around this time. However, we stay green and green flag pit stops ensue. Around the 2-hour mark, there is a huge hit for Gavin Ernstone in the number 61 Roadshagger Audi on the exit of the newly renamed Le Mans Chicane and leads to a full course yellow. Fortunately, he did walk away under his own power, but a very hard hit for that Audi, as just on the exit of that chicane, look, it appeared that he just might have got on the throttle a little bit too hard. The rear end stepped out from underneath him, and the driver's side of that car slapped the safer barrier very hard. On the ensuing restart from this incident, Hailie Deegan, who was running very well up until this point, is spun going into the International Horseshoe and remarkably is not hit by anybody as she was sitting right in the middle of the track. If you're able to go and find the highlight from this, it is pretty incredible that almost the entire field of GS and the entire field of TCR cars managed to avoid hitting her, but not just avoid hitting her, but also avoided creating further incidents into the International Horseshoe. However, we stayed green, and elsewhere the GS and TCR battles really started to unfold around the halfway mark, with great battles unfolding after this safety car, including a 6-way battle for 10th in the GS category. They were really going at it 3 wide through the Daytona Tri-Oval. It was brilliant racing to watch, and I would highly recommend, if you did not watch this race, that you go back and check it out. Around the 2.5-hour mark, Billy Johnson, yes, Billy Johnson, who received that early penalty, was up to P2 and was showing lightning pace. Those Ford Mustangs were really, really strong. We mentioned Hailie Deegan having a strong run there as well. There were multiple other Fords that were in and out of the top 5 through the entirety of this race. However, with an hour to go, it all came crashing down for the number 59 Ford as they found themselves on pit road with their hood up. This after they had a big cloud of smoke that was following around them on track and eventually forced them to retire that Mustang. Around the same time that this occurred, the number 73 Honda World TCR, driven by Ryan Eversley, ground to a halt on pit exit. Fortunately, Eversley was able to get the car to a safe location, and despite these incidents going on within a few moments of one another, we do avoid a full course yellow period. However, with an hour to go, the number 9 car comes to a standstill in the West Horseshoe, which brings out a full course yellow. The entire field opts to pit under this, which will end up being their final pit stop. Now let me tell you, this is where things really, really get interesting, as with 40 minutes remaining, the race resumes with the number 64 Porsche overtaking for the race lead in the GS category, and meanwhile, 10 minutes later, Tim Lewis Jr. in that lone Alfa Romeo TCR entry takes the lead in TCR. With 20 minutes to go, though, Stephen McAleer gets past a trio of cars to jump up into P2 and is quickly hunting down the leading Porsche, that number 64 of Owen Trinkler. And at the time, he is less than a second behind his fellow Porsche driver. Battles, however, were taking place up and down the grid as the battle for 10th between Austin Cindric and Eric Foss sees them going through the grass at the Le Mans Chicane exit, while they were in the middle of a battle with Trent Hindman. Back to the battle at the front, though, as Stephen McAleer quickly catches Trinkler and a 10-minute battle ensues. This battle featured some great side-by-side racing through the Daytona Oval portions, through the infield portions as well. It was just non-stop action and non-stop great racing from these two. But eventually, McAleer in his Porsche ends up on top of that battle. With just 10 minutes to go in the 4-hour race, the number 21 Riley Motorsports Supra suffered heartbreak as they experienced a puncture while running in 7th place. Around this same time, Mark Wilkins, who was paired up with Robert Wickens in that Hyundai TCR. Of course, we mentioned Wickens and the hand controls that he was using this weekend earlier. Wilkins was able to maneuver his Hyundai onto the final podium spot in the TCR category. In the closing laps of the race, though, there was a great three-way battle that took place between Bill Auberlen, Robbie Foley, and the Porsche of Tyler McQuarrie. The two BMW and Porsche drivers went toe-to-toe for a number of laps in what was which was not really decided until quite literally the final lap of the race. One thing to note that was interesting, I thought, while viewing this race, there were a very large number of penalties for improper fire extinguisher procedure. It was something that I had not heard of in a Michelin Pilot Challenge race before, and it got me wondering what really could have led to that. I'm going to try and do some more investigating on it, as I did not hear anything about that in any news articles that came out post-race. But without further ado, we will get into the finishing results for the GS category. And it was Stephen McAleer that brought home the Porsche 718 GT4 RS in first position. He shared that car with Eric Filgueres. Apologies for any enunciation issues there. Meanwhile, standing on the second step of the podium, it was Owen Trinkler and Ted Giovannis, while also standing up on the podium was Bill Auberlen and Dylan McIvern in that Turner Motorsports BMW. It was the number 93 Carbon with Peregrine Racing and Porsche that finished in fourth position, while the number 96 Turner Motorsport BMW rounded out the top 5. Team TGM and the number 46 finished in 6th, while finishing in 7th, it was the number 7 Volt Racing Aston Martin. The number 56 Murillo Racing Mercedes finished in 8th. The number 41 PF Racing Ford finished in 9th. That is the highest finishing Ford after what looked to be a very strong weekend for them. And rounding out the top 10 was the number 72 of Murillo Racing and another AMG. In TCR, it was Rob Block, and Tim Lewis who brought home the victory in their Alfa Romeo Giulietta Veloce TCR. And joining them on the podium, it was two Brian Herta Autosport entries, with Tyler Hagler and Michael Lewis finishing in 2nd, and Mark Wilkins and Robert Wickens finishing in 3rd. In 4th position, it was the number 44 TGB Autosports Audi. Meanwhile, the top 5 was rounded out by the Vanderster Racing number 19 Hyundai Veloster. This was the only Veloster also that was present on the grid. Also of note, Gary Ferreira and Chris Wilson in the number 11 Capstone Motorsports Mercedes AMG GT4 won the Bronze Cup, awarded to the top finishing entry with an all-bronze rated driver lineup. They finished 11th overall. Other noteworthy points from the week leading up to the Rolex 24 there were 3 new qualifying and race records that were set over the Roar and Rolex 24 weekends. Rene Rast set a new mark in LMP2 qualifying for G-Drive Racing with a 135.789 lap. The previous LMP2 race record was broken by Paul Chatin in the number 18 Era Motorsports Oreca with a 135.532, while Felipe Fraga set a new race record time in LMP3 at a 1 minute and 42 seconds for Riley Motorsports. An interesting note pre-race for LMP3 and all GT teams was to remember the recommended stint length for the Michelin tires was just 1 stint. Michelin reminding the teams that they had only approved and recommended that the tires be kept on the car for 1 stint. This did not prove to be much of a problem, though, as there was not a plague of tire issues over the course of the 24 hours by any stretch of the imagination. And the Sun Energy One racing drivers of Rafael Marcelo, Lucas Stoles, Fabian Schiller, and Kenny Habul, they dyed their hair orange to reflect the color of their number 75 Mercedes AMG GT3 Evo. The Sun Energy One drivers had blue hair in last year's Rolex 24, when the car, of course, ran that metallic blue livery. Alrighty, enough talking about pre-race news, support series races. It's time to really sink our teeth into the main event here, the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona. And boy, oh boy, it was a good one here. The action started off before the green flag even fell, as there was an LMP2 that was spun around before they even exited pit road. They had to navigate in reverse through a very tight section of pit road exit before they were able to get that LMP2 pointed in the right direction. They were able to resume their spot on the grid and carry on, though. The green flag was thrown and action was underway. No significant incidents in the early going, but it was a very busy first hour of action, which led to the first full course yellow at the end of it, as the Era Motorsport LMP2 driven by Dwight Merriman crashed while braking into turn 6. A marshal appeared to be struck by debris in this incident and was transported to the hospital in stable condition. With the exception of that accident, it was a fairly uneventful and calm opening hour as Kamui Kobayashi took the lead of the race, and other class battles began to set in. By the 4-hour mark, Renger van der Zande had assumed the lead of the race in the 0-1 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac after an overtake shortly after a full course yellow restart. This came despite contact in the third hour between Kobayashi and the 0-1, which saw the 0-1 have to replace the entire front bodywork. Meyershank Racing's Helio Castroneves also experienced a tire puncture during this time and was forced to make the very slow drive around the circuit. He was able to make it around the circuit and minimize damage to his Acura. And there was a full course yellow that was the result of a very large crash at the exit of turn 6, right where you come back onto the banking. And that is where the Heart of Racing GTD Pro entry driven by Alex Ramirez came together with Kenny Habul's Sun Energy One Racing Mercedes. Ayrton Ori's number 6 Mueller Motorsports Duquesne was unable to avoid the crash as the Mercedes and the Aston were kind of right up against the barrier, but unfortunately Ayrton was unable to miss the Aston Martin. It clipped the car, which led to a very hard impact for both of the drivers, the retirement of the Aston Martin, and a lengthy full course yellow for a cleanup. This crash came only several laps after a restart from a large accident where Kyle Washington in the GMG Racing Porsche crashed heavily into turn 5. All drivers that were involved in these accidents were treated and released from the infield care center. By the 6-hour mark, it was the 0-1 Chip Ganassi Racing, who is now driven by Scott Dixon, that had locked up the first Michelin Endurance Cup points of the season by leading at the 6-hour mark. This came shortly after a full course yellow for the Team TGM Porsche, which was stuck in the International Horseshoe and needed assistance to be recovered. Nico Mueller of High Class Racing led at the 6-hour mark for LMP2, and the Core Auto Sports driver Colin Braun led the LMP3 category. In GTD Pro, it was Dennis Olsen for the KCMG Porsche that led the way, while Tom Gamble for the Heart of Racing led GTD effort led the GTD category. Will Stevens also had a spin during this time in the Wayne Taylor Racing Acura that also led to a tire puncture. Will was able to bring that car around safely without causing too much damage. Both Corvettes were behind the wall by the 9-hour mark of the race after both of them were flirting with the top 5. Of course, you'll recall that there was plenty of discussion leading up to the Rolex 24 with these Corvettes, mostly surrounding their lack of pace and BOP adjustments that had impacted the car's performance. The number 4 went behind the wall during the 7-hour mark with alternator issues, and the number 3 going behind the wall just 2 hours later. There were a couple of small issues causing full course yellow periods, as well, with the LMP3 of John Bennett temporarily losing power and coming to a stop on track, and the Turner Motorsports BMW M4 Gt3 having a very big spin through the tri-oval grass that also led to a full course yellow. At the halfway mark, it was the JDC Miller Motorsports Cadillac, driven by Russell Westbrook, who led after several lead changes, which really kept everyone on their toes. In fact, there were so many lead changes that all of the entered DPI cars were on the lead lap, and all of them had led by the 12-hour mark of the race. There were plenty of incidents that occurred before the halfway mark, though, as Stephen Thomas brought out a full course yellow, and not long after the restart for that incident, Marcus Ericsson in the 02 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac got together with the Action Express Racing car of Tristan Nunez in turn 5, causing both of them to spin and causing Ericsson to take incident responsibility and thus a drive-through penalty. They were not the only car to spin someone out, though, as the former class-leading number 21 AF Corsa Ferrari incurred a drive-through penalty when Luis Perez Campagne turned another car around at the Le Mans chicane. The BMW Team RLL GT3s both dropped out of competition around this time with what was later announced as rear diffuser issues. In LMP2, it was the PR1 Matheson Motorsports Mikael Jensen that led the way, while Kay Van Berlo led in LMP3. Maro Engel picked up maximum Michelin Endurance Cup points for the number 97 WeatherTech Racing car in GTD Pro, while Ollie McElroy led GTD for the Inception Racing McLaren. DPI leader Jimmy Johnson came together with a GT car in hour 13, leading to the number 48 picking up damage in turn 3 and damaging the rear of the car. This was followed up 30 minutes later when the then race-leading Sebastian Bourdais bringing the number 01 Cadillac into the garage with alternator issues. This was under full course yellow conditions, though, for the stop to number 71 Lambo, but it did not help the 01 car as they experienced a lengthy amount of time behind the wall. In the 14th hour, the 02 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac also slowed with reported fuel pressure issues. However, this was quickly resolved after switching to the reserve fuel pump. The aforementioned 01 and number 48 returned to the track after lengthy stops in the garage. The 01 lost 40 laps, while the number 48 was just 22 laps behind the race leaders. And a fire for the number 747 Motorsports Duquesne D08 of Antoine Duquesne brought out the race's 13th full course caution, as the number 63 GTD Pro entry from TR3 Racing retired during this period with a broken steering rack. Chip Ganassi Racing really didn't have much that go their way, as in the 17th hour, the number 02, which we just talked about, that was at the time driven by Earl Bamber, came to the garage with yet another fuel pump failure after that reserve pump that they switched to had died. This left only 2 Cadillacs remaining in contention, and both of them came together as the number 31 Action Express Racing car spun and served a drive-through penalty for the incident in the contact between the number 5 and the aforementioned number 31. The number 5 JDC Miller Motorsports Cadillac had a 19-second lead over Ricky Taylor despite that contact, though, and with just 2 hours remaining in the race. Meanwhile, in GTD, a previous race leader, the Inception Racing McLaren, lost 5 laps after sustaining an issue with the front left brake caliper. A late race safety car, though, with just a half hour remaining, meant it would be a sprint to the finish line to determine the DPI, LMP2, and GTD Pro winners, and boy, oh boy, did it live up to the hype. A great battle in DPI saw Helio Castroneves hold off Ricky Taylor by just over 3 seconds to give Meyer-Shank Racing its overall victory in the Rolex 24 at Daytona 10 years after the team's breakthrough first win at Daytona. All 4 DPIs remained in contention and led in the final hours, but some fortunate full course yellow and great pit strategy helped Meyer-Shank Racing to victory. On the top of the podium, it was Ollie Jarvis, Tom Blomqvist, Helio Castroneves, and Simon Pagenaud. On the second podium spot, it was another Acura, the Konica Minolta Acura of Ricky Taylor, Felipe Albuquerque, Alexander Rossi, and Will Stevens, who just missed out on Wayne Taylor Racing's 4th consecutive Rolex 24 win. And rounding out the podium, it was the number 5 JDC Miller Motorsports Cadillac of Tristan Vautier, Russell Westbrook, Luke Duvall, and Ben Keating. The number 31 Whelen Engineering Cadillac was the other car to finish on the lead lap, finishing in 4th, with the number 48 Ally Cadillac finishing 22 laps off the pace in 5th position. The 02 Cadillac finished 27 laps off the pace, and the other Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac, the 01, finished 39 laps behind the leaders. In LMP2, it was a battle between the Dragon Speed number 81 and the number 8 Tower Motorsports entry in the final stint that led to contact with 15 minutes to go. This caused the number 8 to also lose second position to the number 29 Racing Team Netherlands entry. Race control ultimately deemed there be no further action needed, and the LMP2 results were confirmed. It was the Dragon Speed USA number 81 Orica LMP2 that picked up the win there, driven by Eric Lux, Devin DiFrancesco, Pato O'Ward, and Colin Herta. In second position, it was the number 29 Racing Team Netherlands entry, and rounding out the podium was the number 8 Tower Motorsports car. The only other car to finish on the lead lap was the PR1 Matheson Motorsports LMP2 that finished in 4th. Meanwhile, the number 68 G-Drive Racing car finished in 5th position, 7 laps down. The number 22 United Autosports entry finished 11 laps down in 6th and were the last classified LMP2 finisher, as the number 18 Era Motorsports car, the number 11 PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry, the number 69 G-Drive Racing, and the number 20 High Class Racing entries all retired at various points of the race. In LMP3, it was not a terribly close battle, though, as it was Gar Robinson, Felipe Fraga, Kevin Van Berlo, and Michael Cooper that picked up the win in the number 74 Riley Motorsports Ligier. They had a 1-lap gap back to the number 33 Sean Creech Motorsports entry. And rounding out the podium, 2 laps behind the race leader, was the number 54 Core Autosport Ligier, meaning it was a Ligier sweep of the podium. Finishing in 4th, 4 laps off the pace, was the number 36 Andretti Autosport entry, with the number 13 AWA entry being the top finishing Duquesne, 28 laps behind the race leaders. The last classified LMP3 entry was the number 26 Molnar Motorsports Duquesne, who finished 42 laps behind the Riley Motorsports class winners. The number 38 Performance Tech Motorsports, number 7 47 Motorsports entry, and the number 6 Molnar Motorsports entry all retired at various points of the race. GTD Pro saw an intense battle that the racing world has been talking about all week as the number 2 KCMG and number 9 Pfaff Motorsport Porsches had an intense battle in the closing laps. Mathieu Gemini was in the number 2, while Lawrence Vanthoor in the number 9 exchanged the lead several times in the closing laps of the race, with Vanthoor often bumping Gemini through the infield portion as the race came to a close. On the last lap, though, through the Le Mans chicane, it came to a head as Vanthoor attempted a last lap dive around the outside of Gemini into the chicane, which led to both of them going through the grass and Vanthoor ultimately spinning. The spin demoted the KCMG entry number 2 to 3rd position in the final results as they were passed by the number 62 Risi Competizione Ferrari. The final finishing positions for this class, it was Matt Campbell, Mathieu Gemini, and Felipe Nasr that picked up the victory in the Pfaff Motorsports Porsche. They were 2.1 seconds ahead of the Risi Competizione Ferrari of Alessandro Piriguidi, James Collado, Daniel Serra, and David Rigon. Rounding out the podium was the KCMG entry, the number 2 Porsche 911 GT3R, after a very strong showing from the Porsches this week. In 4th position, it was the Vasser-Sullivan number 14 Lexus RCF GT3, which was the last car on the lead lap in GTD Pro. In 5th place, it was the Proton USA Mercedes that finished 2 laps off the pace, while in 6th place, it was the Corvette Racing number 3 that was 13 laps off the pace. Also 13 laps down was the number 25 BMW M Team RLL Bmw M4 Gt3, the top finishing BMW in the GTD Pro category. And in 8th place, 38 laps off the leaders, was the WeatherTech Racing Porsche 911 GT3R. In 9th, it was the other Team RLL BMW as the 24 car finished 46 laps off the pace. And the last classified finisher is the number 4 Corvette Racing of Tommy Milner, Nick Tandy, and Marco Sorensen. Not classified was the number 97 WeatherTech Racing Mercedes, the number 63 Lamborghini Urkhan, and the number 23 Heart of Racing Aston Martin. In regular GTD, it was the Wright Motorsports Porsche of Ryan Hardwick, Zachary Robichon, Jan Halen, and Richard Leitz that picked up the victory. They finished ahead of the Magnus Racing Aston Martin Vantage GT3, number 44. And rounding out the podium was the number 32 Gilbert Korthoff Motorsports GT3. In 4th place, it was the number 21 AF Corsa Ferrari, while rounding out the top 5 was the number 70 Inception Racing McLaren that was 2 laps behind the race leaders. In 6th place, it was the number 57 of Windward Racing entry that was 8 laps off the pace. They finished 2 laps ahead of the number 64 Team TGM Porsche. In 8th, it was a 71 of T3 Motorsports in that Lamborghini that was 15 laps off the pace. Meanwhile, the number 9, or in 9th position, it was the 27 Heart of Racing team entry that was 19 laps off the pace. If you're not picking up on it already, it was a war of attrition in the GTD category this year, as the number 99 Team Hardpoint Porsche finished 35 laps down in 10th position. The TR3 Racing Lamborghini Huracan only completed 23 hours of the race and were not running at its conclusion, but they did find themselves in P11 at the end of it, as they finished ahead of the number 98 Northwest Aston Martin Racing entry, who were 40 laps down. The number 66 Gradient Racing Acura finished 48 laps behind the pace in 13th position. Meanwhile, the number 47 Centaur Racing Ferrari finished 55 laps down, and the last classified GTD entry was the number 12 Vasser Sullivan Lexus that was 73 laps down. Not classified in the GTD category was the number 42 of NTE entry, number 39 Carbon with Peregrine Racing Lamborghini, the number 96 Turner Motorsport BMW, the number 59 Crucial Motorsports McLaren, the number 28 Allegra Motorsports Mercedes, the number 75 Sun Energy Mercedes, and the number 34 CMG Racing Porsche. There was a lot to unpack from the 24-hour race, as Elton Julian noted post-race that it was a magical time for the Dragon Speed organization, who have claimed 3 Rolex 24 LMP2 class wins in the last 4 years, each coming with a different driver lineup. And while this driver lineup is a one-off entry, Dragon Speed will continue in the IMSA Weathertech Sportscar Championship this year, with Juan Pablo Montoya and bronze-rated Henrik Hedman for the remainder of the season, with Juan Pablo's son Sebastian joining the team for the 12 Hours of Sebring. Third place finisher in LMP2, Luis Delatraz, revealed the struggle that he went through in the closing laps of that LMP2 battle. A fuel calculation error ultimately meant that he was not going to have enough fuel to make it to the end of the race, and was forced to save fuel in the closing laps while also attempting to hold off Colton Herta. Of course, ultimately, the two drivers got together, with Delatraz bringing it home in third position. And the aforementioned miscalculation was actually later determined to be a fueling rig issue for the team. Lawrence Vanthor reported a very emotional in-lap after narrowly losing out on the GTD Pro win at Daytona. Of course, the KCMG and FAF entries went toe-to-toe in the closing laps in what was an amazing battle for GTD class honors. Vanthor described how he seemed to have better pace on the infield portion, and hence was why he was leading towards the little bumps of Gemini on the international and western horseshoes, but just could not match the number 9 of Gemini's pace on the oval portion of the track. While Vanthor does not have any more plans for IMSA races this year, he is slated to run the Nürburgring 24 Hours later this season. In DPI, though, it was Meyer-Shank Racing that finally pulled off its first DPI victory. After struggling immensely in 2021, Mike Shank wanted to rebound very badly with a strong performance in 2022, and it resulted in a win for Simon Pagenaud in his first race with Meyer-Shank Racing. The win for Meyer-Shank came 10 years after their win in a Riley Ford Daytona prototype that was driven by Oz Negri, John Pugh, AJ Allmendinger, and the late Justin Wilson. This was Acura's first 1-2 victory in the race. Lexus came away from Daytona very encouraged with their GTD Pro start after getting a very solid 4th place result. This was a very big improvement over the DNF that they suffered in 2021, and Ben Barnicoat was quoted as saying that to be able to deliver a result like that on my first showing is great, and hopefully it's the start of good things to come this season. Meanwhile, other competitors commented on how tough GTD Pro will be in 2022, as winning driver Matt Campbell of FAF Motorsports said, "I think it's going to be extremely tough. You look at the competition, the teams involved, I think it's going to be a good thing for the category." And let me tell you, if we get more races like we got here at Daytona for the remainder of this season, that is going to be a hell of a fun battle to watch as the season goes on. Also of note is that Porsche is the most successful manufacturer at the 24 Hours of Daytona. Including their wins in 2022, they have over 18 overall wins as a constructor and 4 as an engine partner, with 80 class wins in the race. It was a bittersweet podium for the number 5 JDC Miller Motorsports Cadillac, as they were forced to settle for a 3rd place finish following a series of late yellows that derailed their controlling run. In the late stages of the race, they went from a 20-second lead to being off the preferred pit cycle due to those late race safety cars. The team believed and certainly showed on track that they may have been the only Cadillac that was capable of beating the Acuras in this race, and of course, ultimately falling short. They were tremendously disappointed with the result. Corvette still has a lot to learn, as Antonio Garcia voiced after the disappointing Rolex effort. While the team was able to get a lot of runs to learn the different tires that, again, are different from the ones that considerably different from the ones that they ran in GTLM last season, they do believe that with just a bit more testing, they might be right in the hunt. And as was previously announced, Corvette will reduce its GTD Pro entries to just one for the remainder of the season, as one of the entries is set to be run in the WEC. Meanwhile, also on the proverbial struggle bus was the BMW M4 Gt3s, as the two RLL entries experienced diffuser issues. Both RLL cars finished 13 and 46 laps down to the GTD winning FAF Porsche, and BMW just believes that the nature of the oval and road course combo really attributed to the diffuser issues that they experienced. The team was forced to view the race as more of a test and to help prepare for the 12 hours of Sebring in March. As previously mentioned, the team is now going to move to a one-car operation for the rest of the season, as the focus shifts to the development of the GTP, otherwise known as the LMDH car. IMSA is considering changes to the qualifying race for 2023, the 100-minute race. They want to keep it intact, and they also want to make it slightly different from the 100-minute races that we see at Detroit and Long Beach later in the season. The idea with the qualifying race is to potentially offer more championship points than just the current qualifying points that are offered. This is in an effort to prevent teams from sandbagging and for teams to put a little bit more effort into getting a good result out of the qualifying race. And the final post-race note to touch on is temperatures dipped to record lows in the modern era of IMSA competition, with Michelin reporting an ambient temperature of just 31 degrees Fahrenheit or minus a half degree Celsius in Florida. Yes, in Florida, and a track temperature of just 33 degrees Fahrenheit, which is just above freezing Celsius, on Sunday morning. To quickly run you through the Mazda Idemitsu MX-5 Cup Championship standings, it is Jared Thomas that leads the way with 630 points. Chris Nunes finds himself in second place with 600 points, while Celine Roland is no stranger to the front of these standings and finds himself in third position with 560 points. In fourth with 530 points is our top-rated rookie driver in Connor Zilich, with Joey Atenozio currently rounding out the top five in a current tie at 490 points with Sam Paley. In the Michelin Endurance Cup standings for the DPIs, it is the number 60 Meyer Shank Racing entry who leads the way with 15 points. They are up by 2 points on the number 10 Konica Minolta Acura and the number 5 JDC Miller Motorsports entry. Meanwhile, in a tie for fourth position, it is the 01 Cadillac Racing and the number 31 Wheel and Engineering Racing entries that are tied with 11 points. In LMP2, it is Racing Team Netherlands that leads the way with 15 points. They are ahead of the number 52 Matheson Motorsports entry by 2 points. Dragon Speed also just 2 points off the leaders with 13 points. The number 8 Tower Motorsport entry has 12 points, and rounding out the top 5, it is the number 20 High Class Racing entry. In LMP3, it is the number 74 Riley Motorsports entry that has a very strong lead. They led from the 12th hour all the way through to the finish, and they picked up a total of 17 points for their efforts here in Daytona. In second place, 3 points behind, is the number 54 Core Autosport entry, with the 33 Sean Creech Motorsport entry with 13 points in third. In a tie for fourth, it is the number 36 Andretti Autosport car with the AWA number 13, also with 10 points. In GTD Pro, it is the number 2 KCMG Porsche with 17 points. They are up by 4 points on both the FAF Motorsports number 9 and the number 62 Risi Competizione Ferrari. While in fifth place, it is the number 15 Proton USA entry with 10 points. In GTD Racing, it is the number 16 Wright Motorsports entry that has 14 points, leading the Michelin Endurance Cup standings. They are just 1 point ahead of the Inception Racing number 70, who has 13 points. The number 21 AF Corsa and the number 27 Heart of Racing team both have 11 points, while rounding out the top 5, it is the number 44 Magnus Racing and the number 57 Windward Racing entries, who are tied with 10 points each. Well, if you didn't get enough racing in Daytona, then fear not, because there is more GT and prototype racing taking place next weekend as the Asian Le Mans Series hits the track for the first races of their season. They're doing a very interesting, super condensed season, as they will go racing on February 12th and 13th in the Dubai Autodrome for 4-hour races on each of those days. They'll follow it up on February 19th and 20th with 4-hour races on those days at the Yas Marina circuit. Also on next weekend, Formula E and round 3 of the championship. They are in Mexico City for the Mexico City E-Prix. Qualifying for that will take place on Saturday, February 12th at 12:40 p.m. Eastern Time. That will conclude with the race later on in the afternoon at 5 o'clock Eastern Time. Also, don't forget that you can re-watch any of the action from the Daytona race weekends. Just head over to the IMSA YouTube site. They have all the Mazda MX-5 Cup races, the Prototype Challenge, Michelin Pilot Challenge, everything that you could possibly ask for, including the entirety of the 24 Hours of Daytona, all available for free on the IMSA YouTube channel. Ladies and gentlemen, that will wrap up our Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona preview episode. Probably our longest episode that we've had so far, and one of our first race review podcast for the 2022 season. If there's anything that you think we could change here in the going forward, I want to hear about it. Let us know about it on Twitter, or shoot us a message via DM. We'd love to get any feedback as we adapt the show in this season. But really, a big thank you again to our early Patreon supporters. And if you too want to support the show, then you can go to patreon.com/OffInTheS's. Another way that you can support the show for absolutely free is just by hitting that subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast app to make sure you never miss a new episode, and by leaving us a review. It really, really does help a lot. You can also follow along with us on Twitter at OffInTheS's or on YouTube at OffInTheS's podcast. Once again, a big thank you for tuning in. I hope everybody really enjoyed their Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona. I hope everybody has a great upcoming race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.